Thank you very much, Professor Brown. Now we are moving to Professor Ruggero, Vimercati, Sanseverino. Bu Profesör Ruggero kendisi Hadis Anabilimi Başkanı, İslam Tübingen Üniversitesi'nde İslam Teolojisi Merkezi'nde ve halen Kadiyat'ın Eşifa ismi üzerinde çalışmalar yapıyor. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I'm very happy to be here and at the conference, and thanks to my friend and colleague Najim Fikir for the invitation to this conference, which, in my mind, addresses a very important issue of contemporary Islam, of contemporary Islamic thought, and a phenomenon that strikes the observer of the evolution of Islamic thought in modern times. This was a conference abstract terms or called textual Islamism or even Protestantization. So as I understand both terms, it's the tentative to express the occurrence of a shift or of a change of the way Islamic scriptures are considered. More precisely, modern Islamic thought is, to some extent, characterized by a deep concern for the text, or let's say for the textual dimension of Islamic revelation, normativity, and authority. And it is perhaps in this sense that one could draw an analogy to the sola scriptura principle of Protestantism, to its mistrust towards the right? Sorry. So maybe this is why one may draw then an analogy to the principle of sola scriptura of Protestantism, to its mistrust towards the authority of tradition and of its representatives. And after all, and the endeavor of Protestants or Protestantism to finally go back to the source, okay, this is the motto, one of the mottos of the reform of Protestantism, and to allow for a direct and unmediated access of the individual believer to the wording of the revealed text. And I would say that this analogy is justified to some extent, even though I would say that this Protestantized Islamic thought, one may say so, is lacking the sophistication and depth of contemporary Protestant theology as represented by figures like Karl Barth or Dietrich Bonhoeffer, for example. Anyway, this phenomenon described is to my mind highly relevant for our understanding of the current crisis of Hadith tradition and of what I consider a widespread of Hadith skepticism. So when asked to hold a talk about modernist approaches towards Hadith, I thought it might be interesting to deal with the shift and change alluded to by the terms of Protestantization. In fact, it seems to me that there's a particular concern for the text, which distinguishes this modernist approach to Hadith. And that this concern for the text is one of the salient features of modernist approach to Hadith, especially of its skepticism towards the Hadith, towards the Hadith tradition. So this paper, if you like, allows me in fact to reflect on an impression which crystallized in my mind when preparing courses on Hadith in modern Islamic thought for my students. It's a reflection about the root of modernist approaches to Hadith and its difference to classical Hadith scholarship, and the change of the way to consider the nature and authority of written text. So the argument I would like to develop today is firstly that this modernist approach, and in fact the widespread Hadith skepticism in contemporary Islamic thought, has its roots in a certain vision and conception of the nature of hadith and of its transmission. And secondly, that this conception differs from the conception of classical hadith scholarship. In other words, I would like to propose to inquire into some of the basic assumptions of hadith skepticism, and to ask the question, how is contemporary hadith skepticism related to a certain understanding of what hadith means and of how it has been transmitted? Okay. By trying to answer this question in this short time, I will not delve into specific sources or the various schools of thought by individual figures of Islamic modernism, such as have been analyzed by the two Browns, Daniel and Jonathan Brown, in their books. But I will try to identify and to reflect on general tendencies and futures, most importantly on basic assumptions which characterize, to my mind, or might characterize, the various modernist approaches towards hadith. So I would like to excuse for not giving you detailed references, and rather to present or to try to present to you the outcome of an academic reflection and, in fact, an experiment which is just in its beginnings. So let's turn now what I call the modernist approach to hadith and hadith skepticism. Now, what is modernist approach? How can you define this modernist approach? Well, I will include all those claims or approaches, if you want, schools of thought, who claim the necessity of a critical re-evaluation of the hadith tradition. Be it the canonical corpus, okay, so you have to re-evaluate the corpus transmitted by Islamic tradition, by the Sunni tradition in this case, or even the methodology of hadith identification. So why this necessity of re-evaluation? Okay, why this skepticism? That's, to my mind, how this skepticism towards hadith might be explained, amongst other things. So what is hadith skepticism? How would I define hadith skepticism? So as you can see on the paper, on the PowerPoint, I would define it as negating or doubting that knowledge of the original prophetic teaching and practice is possible through the hadith corpus transmitted by Islamic tradition. The skepticism is a category of epistemology, so it's about doubting the possibility of knowledge, and in this case, the knowledge of the original prophetic teaching and practice through the hadith corpus. Which are the reasons, or which are the reasons why modernist approaches to hadith are skeptical towards hadith, let's say? So I think you can resume 5 points which are mentioned by most of these approaches or thinkers or schools of thought. The first one being the fact or the consideration or the opinion that some hadiths are not acceptable to rational consideration. Okay, so you have cases, okay, the famous hadith of the fly, for example, or the hadith just cited about finding God at the bottom of earth and things like this, okay, which are not acceptable or to the interpretation of modernist thinkers, let's say, to rational consideration. Secondly, the opinion that hadith, well, it depends, and all the hadiths or some hadiths, okay, this is according to the schools, that some hadiths distort historical reality. Okay, that hadiths are not a truthful documentation of what actually happened, okay, in the time of the Prophet. The third opinion is that some hadith, or even all the hadith, contradict discoveries of natural sciences. Okay, this is a reason for modernist thinkers that say to be skeptical of the hadith tradition. Okay, that the hadith tradition gives us knowledge of what the Prophet said and did. Fourthly, that some hadiths are not conform to the teaching of the Quran. Okay, here of course one has to say to a certain reading of the Quran. Okay, of course, it always depends. As we have said, any text is an open text. Okay, you have to interpret it. But to a certain reading of the Quran, so there are Muslim modernists who consider that the hadith corpus as it has been transmitted by Sunni tradition does contradict some points of what they consider to be the teaching of the Quran. And fifthly, that some hadiths violate modern ethical standards. Okay, they are not on the standards of a certain view of ethics, okay, which is mostly determined, of course, by modern ethics by Kant, for example, etc. So these, the conclusion, of these, let's say, criticism or reason is that these hadiths cannot possibly be a historically true document of what the Prophet of God said or did. Okay, it's not possible the Prophet said something which contradicts reason, which contradicts, or which distorts historical reality, which contradicts discoveries of natural sciences, etc. Okay, so this is like a sort of conclusion. And then further step that the classical hadith tradition is not reliable as a source for Islamic doctrine and practice. Okay, so here we have this hadith skepticism, okay, this idea, this mistrust towards the hadith tradition as it has been transmitted and canonized by the Sunni tradition. And this is why hadith, in the opinion of the thinkers, constitutes a major obstacle for the reform or modernization of Islam. Okay, because hadith contains these elements, okay, contrary to reason, contrary to a certain view of ethics, contrary to scientific discoveries, etc. So we can ascertain for the moment that these reasons, if you like, concentrate or focus very clearly on the hadith as text. Okay, here it's really the matter which is in question. Okay, they're not considering questions of transmission. No, it's just really the meaning of the matter. Okay, so we have a sort of identification of hadith with the matter. What counts for the hadith is the matter. Okay, we have this, I think, this focus on the matter. This identification of hadith with the matter. And the fact, and this idea, I think, which is implicit here, that the authority of hadith lies in its textual dimension. That is what makes of the hadith a source for theology. Okay, a normative source, a theological source, is its content as a text, and not the origin to which it is connected through transmission. Okay, which is the vision of classical hadith policy, to which I will turn now, and which to my mind is very well described as a term of traditionalism, as it has been exposed by William Graham in 1993 in his article, Traditionalism in Islam. So this view of the hadith, of what the hadith actually is, okay, and what the transmission of hadith works, or how it works, or on what it is based, okay, is, well, to make it short, grounded basically on two concepts, on the concept of continuity, it is idea also, okay, and the trustworthiness of transmission. Okay, these are the distinctive elements which or criteria, which are considered in order to decide whether it's hadith, whether a text, okay, a khabar, if you want, a report about the Prophet, about his these words, etc., this can be considered as theologically relevant, as a testimony of revelation, in fact. Okay, Sunnah being Wahi as well, you know, considered Wahi in the Sunni tradition. So, and as you know, in classical Hadith scholarship, the text is never separated from its transmission. Okay, the definition of Hadith is Matan wa Isnad. Matan wa Isnad. Okay, this is the definition. How you define Hadith. It's not the text. It's the text and its transmission. Okay. And why? Because well, this doesn't mean that there is no Matan criticism in classical Hadith scholarship. Okay, there are studies about Modernleşme and others, etc. No, but that there is this idea of necessity of considering both. Okay, of considering the relation between the text and the transmission. That the text on its own doesn't have any theological value. It is a transmission, okay, and a certain, a validating transmission, okay, and authoritative transmission, which goes back to the prophet, okay, which has a continuity to the prophet, which is trustworthy. It is this transmission which makes of the text, which makes of the Matan al-Hadith, and thus a testimony of revelation. And then, of course, there's also the question of Ijma. Okay, we don't have the time now to enter this, but just to focus on this idea that in classical Hadith scholarship, it's less the question whether the text of Hadith is conformed to certain criteria, rationality, history, ethics, natural science, etc., which is emphasized, but it is a question whether the text is reconnected to the prophet via transmission. So it's a question of continuity and trustworthiness of transmission, and not the compatibility of the text, which is decisive here. So we have, in fact, I would argue, two visions of Hadith. Okay, we have two different visions of what Hadith is. We have in German the nice word of Offenbarungszeugnis. Okay, in classical Hadith scholarship, Hadith is really an Offenbarungszeugnis. It's a testimony of revelation, okay, which has to be actualized. Okay, we have then this notion of Ihya Sunnah, and this is why you have, well, I don't know how much time I have.
1 minute.
Oh. Okay, so I will skip this. 2 minutes, okay. I will skip this. I'm sorry. Okay, let's then look, or let's now ask, which are the points for which Hadith skeptics reproach classical Hadith scholarship? Okay, which are the points which are criticized or reproached towards classical Hadith scholarship? So I have listed some points. First point, I mean, it's not exhaustive, but these are the ones that came to my mind. The first one, major Hadith transmitters and evaluators did not consequently apply their own methodological standards. Okay, for example, I mean, you might know that Daraqutni, okay, showed that Bukhari in some cases didn't stick to his standards. Okay, this was then by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, okay, he tried to explain that this is not, etc. But this didn't really pose a problem. Okay, this is not a major problem for classical Hadith scholarship. Why? Because you have the authority of Al-Bukhari, because of the Ijma, etc. But it became a problem in modern times. So, okay, it became a reason why one has to distrust the collection of Al-Bukhari. Secondly, for example, the Isnad is not sufficient for the evaluation of the authenticity of Hadith. Okay, this Isnad paradigm, which I tried to explain to you in some minutes before, okay, this system of evaluation, or this method of evaluation based on the Isnad, so on the continuity and the trustworthiness, is, or yes, it's not enough. Okay, there's this idea that there's a necessity of a textual criticism, okay, which takes into consideration the text in its own right, without relating it to transmission. Okay? Only the content. So we have seen this right at the beginning, okay, that the text doesn't conform to certain criteria of rationality, or another, the reliance open oral transmission. Okay, for modern hadith skeptics, this constitutes a major problem. Okay, oral transmission is less reliable than the existence of a written text, of a document, and which in classical scholarship, it's the contrary. Okay, there's from the beginning a mistrust towards the text, which reminds of Plato. Okay, it's really a mistrust towards the text. Okay, I will come now to the conclusion. So let me say that all of these criticisms which I listed here, to my mind, but this is an idea which I would like to expose to you, are grounded on the identification of hadith with text. Okay, we can see this in this case, okay, in the fact to reduce the hadith to its textual dimension, okay, to the fact that the authority of the hadith lies in the text. And not only this, that in order to be counted as a text, it must meet certain criteria which I would qualify as positivist, i.e. as empirically original. Okay, I promise you I come to a conclusion. So, yes, I have to skip this, I'm very sorry. So this analytic overview, which is no pretension to be exhaustive of fact, of course, was intended only to open up maybe a direction of research in hadith studies in the modern Islam, and by considering the role of a certain type of textualism. This was precisely the aim of the paper, so maybe you can read it yourself, and I will, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was really poignant on pointing out the kind of characteristics of modern criticism. My question is a little, it's geared towards you, but also some of the other panelists, in the sense that I think what underlines your understanding of skepticism towards hadith is a certain understanding of language, right? So and the word positivism in your talk is very indicative of that. So we could have an understanding of a positivist approach towards language, which creates the kind of skepticism towards ambiguous transmissions, right, that don't fit into a positivist program, right? And this is where I think literalism, and this is for Jonathan, where literalism actually does exist, right? So we can think of literalism maybe as a program in which meaning is produced through language itself. There's no extra linguistic apparatus that is needed in order to produce meaning from language, right? Language itself produces meaning. There's no thing. So I just wanted to comment from Mr. Dr. Sanseverino, as they say. I apologize, about the relationship between positivism and the modern program of hadith skepticism, and to Dr. Brown about whether or not he would entertain a definition of literalism that sees literalism as something that language itself can produce meaning without any extra linguistic framework.
Okay, so basically,
I'm not a specialist in philosophy, but I imagine this sort of the linguistic turn. You were talking about a linguistic turn in sciences about this obsession with focus on language. Is that what you're talking about?
It's like
Can language mean anything without any reference to the context?
It can, but then people would just say that it's the reader or the hearer that is providing the context. So when you say that the reader has all the power, you know, in certain postmodernist
I'm
ideas.
saying that like we designed a program of interpretation where
we design a program of interpretation in which we don't need to go outside of language to get meaning. So for instance, we don't need a metaphysical system that helps us interpret language.
Yeah, this is impossible. You know,
Yeah,
language exists in the context, and actually everything exists in the context. You cannot imagine anything outside the context. It's impossible.
Yeah, even if you say that we're not going to rely on any metaphysical context, that's your metaphysical context.
Oh, so I think that's what I wanted to understand. Is that do you mean by context also like the metaphysical?
And then in fact you are going to have a metaphysical context. It's probably just going to be a secularized like version of Christianity, right? You're just going to be basically a post-Christian, pseudo-Christian who, you know, watches Lord of the Rings movies or things like that.
Okay, thank you. Now, yes, please.
Yes, so, well, I wanted actually, sorry.
Yes.
I wanted actually in the talk of Johnson Brown, if by context, it's not something like Gadamer means basically the horizon of understanding. Maybe this, maybe this is clearer, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, this notion of the context of being inevitable and therefore non-contextualized communication being impossible, I think this is a major theme of Gadamer and others thinkers in the past, 70 or 80 years.
Yes. Okay.
Concerning the positive, so your question of in Islamic modern thought, well, the example of Abdu, I mean, there you can trace some influence. Abdu, I mean, was influenced by Auguste Comte, for example, I mean, the champion of modern positivism. But I don't think that you need to trace these visible influence if you want. I think you can really read between the lines. Okay, this new need, or this new understanding of authenticity, this new understanding of history, this new understanding of truth, which is, I think it's positivistic. I think so. Maybe not totally, maybe not in this sophisticated sense, but in tendency.
Okay. Yes.
I have a question for last presenter.
Yes.
I don't know the exact name, unfortunately. I had a professor. He used to say that muhaddithin were methodological positives, not philosophical positives. If you consider their methodology, for instance, companions had to see Prophet by themselves, and reporters had to see their teachers, and it seems very, very positive attitude. And if you consider modern Buddhism, they criticize not methodologically, but philosophical positive. In sense, for instance, according to today considerations, according to rational considerations, what do you think about that? In my view, muhaddithin were very, very positive, but in sense of methodological positive.
Okay. Thank you.
If you give permission, Professor, I had another question.
Or maybe later.
Maybe later.
After that. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for this question. To answer very briefly, I would agree with modernist skeptics of hadith that, for example, if you take the adala of the companions, okay, the fact that every companion, I mean, everybody who has seen, who met, okay, according to the definition of the prophet, has automatically this adala, okay, which means, in fact, the impossibility to lie about the prophet. This is what adala actually means, okay? So, how do you want to prove this empirically? That the companions, that it is impossible for them to lie over the Prophet. I would agree with modernists that this is not an empirical, provable, idea. That this is a theological postulate. You believe it or you don't.
But
So there is no positivism, I think.
Positivism.
Yeah, but this shows that there is no sort of positivism in classical hadith scholarship, I think. I wouldn't agree.
Would you allow me to jump in? 1 second.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I was thinking of something in connection with my very good friend Mehmet, who was just saying about, and it's a philosophical point actually, so that might clarify the point.
So we have hadith scholars and philosophers.
Which is...
They cannot exist together, but we have them here.
In the old days they couldn't, now they can. So the point I'm interested in is that what I find quite interesting about hadith in the Islamic tradition from an epistemic perspective is that Muslims were among the first, and I'm glad you mentioned Plato and his Test, because Plato and Aristotle, they inherited us, okay, and inherited the history of philosophy, that obsession or that assumption that the only two sources of knowledge are sense and reason. Muslims introduced a third one, which is what we call nowadays, khabar, testimonial belief and evidence. What is now known and talked about in analytical philosophy. And now analytical philosophers do accept testimonial belief and evidence. So for instance, back to the point that you raised about the adala of the Sahaba, how do we know it? It's not a matter of proving, it's a matter that we, as a community of epistemic agents, to use a proper philosophical term, okay, we agree that X, Y, and Z is right. And actually, nowadays, okay, people in science, like for instance, any scientist doing relativistic physics doesn't need to go and prove Newtonian physics. He just accepts it, okay, and goes to the relativistic critique of Einstein, accepting that that has already happened. So that happens in science nowadays. So the question then would be, how can you, if I read Mehmet's point, which I think was right to the point about how to distinguish between that methodological positivism versus that content-based, he called it philosophical, this content-based positivism that the Salafis are considering. But I agree actually with him that was a very interesting epistemological move on part of the...
Thank you very much. Yes.
This one, I wouldn't agree because the community, it's not anybody. You know, the community which agrees of the Adala program, it's not anybody. You know, it's a community. I mean, it's the ulama who represent the community, and not everybody can be ulama. Okay, you need a certain connection to the Prophet and a certain authority, ijazah, etc., etc., etc. Okay, there's a whole. So this idea of ijma, it's not exactly the same, I think. But
the same holds for scientific communities. I mean, you are not going to get the agreement on Newton from a kid who studies physics in secondary school.
So we can continue over the team, but I would like to make just one comment as a sociologist, you know, with my identity as a sociologist. So how things are empirically proven in social sciences? How is it proven? So you don't survey everybody. You know, let's say about German society, when you prove something, you don't need to survey everybody. You take a sample, you know, you look at the sample, and then you prove it or disprove it. So the same thing applies to Sahaba. So, I mean, you can examine like a sample from Sahaba and then see if they are liars or not. So if you see that they are not liars, then this proves empirically that they are not liars. This is how like social science works. I mean, like this is how we prove things empirically in sociology, anthropology, economics, politics. You know, so it's how it works, and I believe that it is possible to empirically prove that the Sahaba had adalah, they did not lie. We can prove it, and actually I have my PhD thesis on this. I have worked on that, and we can talk more about that. So, çok teşekkür ediyorum. Bu oturumu burada noktalıyoruz. Hocalarımıza bir alkış yapalım.